Hey guys, just a quick trigger warning before you watch or listen to this. There will be subjects discussed such as self-harm.
Welcome back to The Way. In the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at some of our testimonies, which is basically our stories of how we came to faith. And today, Jesse,
Hey.
we're going to hear some of your testimony. So exciting.
We are.
So let's begin from the beginning.
From the beginning.
How was your childhood?
From which point exactly is the beginning? Is it
Birth.
Birth.
Yeah.
Gosh. I had a really epic childhood.
Epic.
Like a real epic childhood. I had awesome parents, and they were musicians, so they used to travel the world with me. So like even before I was 2.
More like you with them.
More like me with them. You're right. That's very
Rock and
true.
roll baby.
Rock and roll baby, mate. But yeah, so I did a lot of flying, a lot of traveling, surrounded by musicians growing up. And yeah, I loved it. I had an awesome time, and I had an awesome group of friends at church. And yeah, I don't know. What more into my childhood do you want to know?
I will, everything.
Everything.
When were you always a Christian?
Was I a Christian? I remember I initially decided that I wanted to be a Christian when I was about 8 years old. I remember being sat in like the boot of a car having a conversation with my friend Hudson. And and then I was like, oh yeah, I think Jesus is real. Great. And then a few years later, when I was 11, I ended up getting baptized, which was really cool, which was awesome. And my cousins were getting baptized on the same day. And my parents baptized me, and
That's special.
in the church that my granddad also helped start. So there's a lot of like heritage, a lot of family heritage. But I wouldn't say that it really sunk in and it was really real until I was a bit later. Even though I decided I believed it and I decided to get baptized, it still was kind of head knowledge, not heart knowledge. I didn't want to live for it. I just believed in it, if that makes sense.
What made that decision for you to follow Jesus? I suppose that initial one of like wanted to get baptized, and then compared to when you said a bit later on, what was going on?
Well, I think I was watching the new Percy Jackson series last night. And one of the whole concepts is these monsters are trying to like take out the kids, or like these demigods, these guys who have got like great calling on their life, before they're old enough to like defend themselves or strong enough to actually fight back. And that's almost what I felt happened to me. It's like when I was 11, I became a Christian. But before it fully sunk in on the fact that it was everything to me and I wanted to live for it, I just had quite a lot thrown at me. Joined secondary school. That's a hectic place. Oh my gosh, secondary school. And just was very quickly taken away by all the comparison that goes on, all the longing to fit in school, and kind of pushed my faith into like this tiny little side thing, because it isn't very cool when you're in school to say, hey, I'm a Christian. I like believe in Jesus.
Cool.
It doesn't feel very cool. It is cool.
The coolest.
It is cool. It's the best thing in the world. But it doesn't feel very cool at the time because no one else is really doing that. And so I tried all the stuff to fit in. Tried the party stuff. Tried the drinking stuff a bit, and got into a few fights. And so I rock up to this field and
a duel,
and like these like roadmen from my school are like going, "You got this, bro. You got," and I'm like, "Yeah, of course I do." I've never been in a fight before, and it's a snowy day. It was like the school got dismissed because it was snowy, and
so much detail.
We got into like a circle.
Yeah,
everyone was like, "Yo, massive fight!" And I got up and I was ready, and he just like one smacks me in the face, hits me in the eye. And I just can't see anything out this eye anymore. I'm like totally blurry. And I'm like, oh snap. And at that point he just like goes in, just bosh. I like fall on the floor and he's like, yeah, come on. And I'm like, oh no, this is my reputation gone.
Did you get a black eye?
Yeah, he broke my nose.
Oh.
It was bad. And I remember I walked home and I went to my parents and my mum was like, what happened? And I said, I sledded into a tree.
You
I
sledded.
slid into a tree and, you know, my whole face got mashed up, Mum. She's like, oh, right.
Did not believe a word.
No, of course not. Of course not. But I remember in that time, I was trying so desperately to fit in. And there were periods where I did fit in. And I was like, I was never like popular, but everyone was friends with me. I didn't have any enemies.
I wasn't probably, but like
you know.
everyone loved me.
Well, I wasn't in the popular group.
Yeah,
but
no,
like,
I know. I know what you mean.
And but besides that, there was so much going on under the surface as well. As I said, like I was getting into fights or whatever, but also in my home, I was just struggling so deeply mentally.
Sure.
And I remember often like binge eating to try like stop whatever was going on. I just like hoard chocolate and then go to throw it up afterwards. I remember looking in the mirror, pulling out my hair, and like 14 years old. This is so young. Like pulling out my hair and screaming all the reasons why like I wasn't enough. Like you're ugly, you're fat, like you're not good at football or whatever. And to be honest, the body shaming stuff never really hit me, but the stuff like I wasn't as sporty as the other kids.
More like your worth.
Yeah, my worth. That I used to do that, and then you know, and that led into so much empty nights in my room with lots of like, you know, you'd even say suicidal thoughts, lots of self-harm of forms. And I remember my parents being broken for me. And my parents were so upset with where I was, not because they were upset in me, but they were upset with the fact I was just being robbed from so much life. And I remember getting into an argument with them one time, and I stormed out, they ran off, and I walked out into my garden and I looked in and I just saw them like on their knees crying, praying for me. And that began to sow a seed in me that, oh man, that's not really, I'm not living how I'm meant to live. Again, I do think I was a Christian. I think
You believed in God.
I believed in God,
Sure.
but as soon as I started believing in God and decided to commit my life, I was just thrown in with loads of stuff. Similar to what I said at the beginning, it's like the enemy, I believe, was trying to cut me out of Christianity thing before, you know, I grew strong enough to really recognize who he is and battle him. And then I hit one of my lowest times where I snuck a girl in to the house when a good friend of ours, Joel and Megan, if you're watching this, were babysitting. And it was so annoying because I just couldn't make any moves on her. Like,
So annoying.
I was so annoyed. I was like, I've just snuck a girl in. Like, I'm ready to like, you know, and I just couldn't do anything. And again, like, I remember I then snuck her back out. We just lied in bed for like 7 hours and chatted. And then I snuck her back out the next morning and I was like, what the heck was that? And now looking back, I realized that actually God still had his hand on me and was still protecting me, even when I felt the furthest from him. But a week after that, I went to a Christian festival called New Day, which is, I grew up going to New Day. I love it deeply. My parents always led worship there. But I didn't want to go this year, and my parents kind of dragged me along. And I remember on the first day, a good friend of mine, Joe McNamara, got up and he was preaching, and he brought out a white dressing gown, and he said, you know, the Christian journey isn't simple. Sometimes we pick up stains, sometimes we pick up like hardships. And he grabbed this black paint and he was like, maybe you feel like you don't fit in at school. And he poured black paint over the white dressing gown. Maybe you feel like you're not good enough at this. He poured black paint on the dressing gown. And he said, maybe you feel like your parents aren't proud of the way you live. And he poured black paint on the dressing gown. And I remember just this like heart sink moment, like,
wow, yeah,
that's how I feel. I feel rejected by my parents because I know that I'm not living the way I should be. And then he like gave this amazing story and was like, well, guess what? Jesus doesn't see you like this. He chucked the dressing gown and he grabbed a new one and he said, because of Jesus dying for you, this is who you are. You are cleaned, you are washed, you are white. White as snow. not white. I was like, well, I am white. But
Yeah.
and yeah, I remember it being really powerful, and I remember breaking down in tears and being like, wow, God is real. And the next day I remember waking up going, what a load of crap that was. Like, I mean, I was just emotional. I was going through the works. And I was like that for a few days.
Yeah.
And then on the fourth night, they had a healing night. And the guy said, put your hand up if you want to be healed. And I didn't put my hand up. I had a leg problem at the time. I was in physiotherapy. But essentially I walked on my tiptoes growing up, which meant my Achilles tendon
Don't do that, kids.
was grown in the wrong way. It was like short and fat instead of long and thin. And it meant that it burnt out really quickly. So I couldn't really run over 200 meters or over like it would literally just freeze up my whole leg.
Sure.
Anyway, I was like, oh, my thing's secondary. I can like sort that out on my own. So I didn't ask for healing. Night finished. We walked out, and my friend Hudson chases after me, and he's like, Jesse, like,
Hudson from before.
Same Hudson from before.
Good old Hudson.
And he said, Jesse, don't you have a leg problem? And I went, yeah, but like, I don't need God for that. Like I can just do some stretches. And he was like, no, let's pray for it. And I remember him sitting me down on a bench, and my friend Zach, who's also one of my closest friends, coming up to me and like holding out my feet. And he was like, all right, well, let's pray for it. And suddenly there's a group of 20 people surrounding. And I'm like, oh, this is so embarrassing. There's so many people watching and nothing's going to happen. And my friend Zach prayed a really simple prayer, because it's not about our prayers, it's about his power. And he said, well, it is about our prayers, but it doesn't matter how, like,
it's Jesus that heals.
It's not about how perfect our prayers are. It's about how perfect he is that heals. And he just prayed, Lord Jesus, we pray in the name of Jesus, will you heal Jesse's leg? And suddenly, like, a warmth began to just rush through my legs. And I was like, what the heck is this? What is going on? And I began to see like my legs begin to like, and my Achilles tendon begin to like shape and like stretch out. And I was like, what just happened? Like, what do I do? And he was like, oh, test it. And I was like, how do I test it? And he's like, well, can you run? And I was like, no. And he said, do it. And I said, okay. And so I ended up running around this whole campsite, which was around 1 kilometer. And it was the furthest I've ever ran it in my life at that point, basically. I mean, maybe I ran longer when I was like 3, but to my knowledge. And I remember just being like, wow, he's real. And he loves me and he chooses me. And so I ran to my youth pastor at the time, a guy called Joel Nicholas, shout out. And I said, Joel, what do I do? Like, how do I live for God? And he started meeting with me weekly for about 4 years. And that kind of shaped who I am and my journey with the Lord. So,
wow.
Yeah. Sorry, that was quite long.
No, well, thank you for sharing it.
Include everything.
No, I enjoyed all the stories. So after that moment where actually you had that healing and it's gone from not just head knowledge, but heart knowledge, what do you think changed? How has that shaped you moving forward from that time?
I mean, we talk about childlike faith a lot and we look at it as an example because Jesus said, like, let all the children come to me.
Yeah.
And I had childlike faith. I was just so hungry when I was 14 to learn. I like even look back at myself and like, wow, I need some of that desire nowadays. I remember as soon as I became a Christian, I started going into school and I started going like, guys, like Jesus, like you don't understand, like Jesus. And
did you change much in school? Like did it change much for you, like in your friendship groups or?
Oh yeah, it was quite intense when I went back. I grew up in Brighton, which is quite known for its like wokeness. You'd say.
Yeah.
So it's separation from religion, and therefore when I went to school and started like proclaiming the fact that I've become a Christian, I was very quickly met with all the questions that 14-year-olds have, like, okay, so creation story. Prove that to me since you're so clever. Or like, okay, same-sex marriage. Or like, prove that. And you're like, oh my gosh. And I was like 14, so I had no idea. And I probably didn't answer all the stuff correctly. But
that's correctly.
You can't. And I tried, and it fell in my face. But I started getting shunned out of school, essentially. I used to sit with my friendship group, and they'd like get up and be like, "No, we don't even want to speak to you, and maybe sit elsewhere." Or I mean, it was just like, it was subtle, but it was really damaging.
It wasn't
would just
easy.
be like,
Yeah.
wouldn't get invited to this party or this party. I just got cut off, to the point where like you'd sit with your friends and they're all telling you how great of a time they had without you, and like you weren't invited, and you're like, oh, what the heck. And so I started to begin to isolate myself a bit, just because I found it quite hard. It would always be hard questions with my friends or whatever. Started going into like the music rooms to hide, and it actually started getting worse, where there started to have people look for me because of my faith. They'd be like, "Oh, we heard that you're a Christian now, which means you hate this person, or you're against this kind of like belief. So we hate you, and we're going to come and like attack you." So I had people wandering around the school looking to attack me.
So how did you deal with that?
Well, I hid. That was it.
But like
It would be
emotionally, internally, like how did you deal with that? How did you move and grow from that?
Well, I moved into, the music rooms, and I just spent time with God. That was it. That was my comfort. I used to walk to school and, declare Psalm 23 over myself every morning. Like, even though I walked into the valley of the shadow of death, and Lord, this is the shadow of death, I need you. This is the valley, I need you. And
It's still quite intense for...
Yeah, it was intense.
A 14-year-old.
Well, I used to have to get escorted out of school.
Oh my goodness.
Because people would wait for me at the gates, and the teachers would come into my lesson in like fifth period and be like, "All right, Jesse, time to go home." And they used to like take me around a back route, and like, rather than dealing with the kids, they used to, which is silly. But anyway, but the teachers weren't always better as well. I remember being in a class where a teacher stood me up and they were like, "Right, we're out of our curriculum. We've finished all the content. So today we're just going to talk about it was in history, the history of Christianity and like evolution," because we were talking about like Catholicism in the class. So they're like, "Jesse, why don't you stand up? And if anyone has any questions for him, you go."
Oh my goodness.
And then I was like, and the teacher started and said, "So what do you think about evolution? How could God have created it in 7 days when there's so much scientific evidence?" And then she like walked out the room. And like, I was just stood in front of like 30 kids who were just like at my throat. It was pretty brutal. But I found God. I found this hidden place where I could bring all of that to God, pray I used to spend like 50 minutes a day just praying, reading. Even like, I used to fast like a lot, just for my school. When I was 14 years old, it's like a whole different thing. And so, yeah, it was tough, but I really believe that it set me up well, because from a get-go in my Christian faith, I started spending time in the secret place. Yeah. There's so much in the Bible which tells us to, run into your room, close the door and pray, like spend time with me. And I didn't start off figuring out all the theology specifically. I just spent time with him. Yeah. And it really created a deep well in me, and a deep thirst and hunger and deep root in me. Yeah, it was a real deep relationship. I felt like David. I felt rejected, which is like the whole of David's story. But that was my school experience.
Yeah. And then from then, you can just keep chatting. We're just listening. I'm just sat here listening. We're all listening.
Yeah.
Please keep going.
And then what happened? We went into lockdown, which was, there was a lot in between that. Yeah. As well.
So that's 14 and you're now 19.
I'm now 19.
Almost 20.
Almost 20.
But 19.
Which would be huge. When I turn 20, I can't say I'm a teenager anymore. Do you feel grown up? Is the transition to 20 like massive?
No. Maybe. I don't know. No. It's been 5 years since that like time when you're 14 and in school, and obviously now you do quite a lot of stuff with like Christian-y social media content. You're now actually, compared to being hidden from all these people, you're now actually quite public to a lot of people, and that you can see how God used that time in your school that is now shaped where you are now. Well, I think I can.
Yeah.
So you can.
No, totally.
So yeah, what are some key moments that's happened in these like last 5 years, I guess, for you?
Key moments. Started TikTok. It sounded like Genuinely.
Can we bring up some of Jesse's old TikToks?
No.
Michael,
we've
please
done
can we
this
bring
before.
up? Yeah, but let's do it again.
We
This
don't
is
need
all
to
about
do
his
this again.
testimony. Can we bring
Oh.
up his old TikToks? Yeah, we will.
Oh,
Yeah, we will.
snap. I'm going to private
What's that
everything.
really good one that's like where you like look up to the camera? It's like a music and it's like you're looking away and you like look up and you like give a little cheeky smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know exactly the one you're talking
What's
about.
the song that's in the background?
More than a woman.
Is it that one?
Two. Oh. Yeah, it's horrible.
It's really bad.
It cringes my socks off.
Me too.
But
Anyway, you started TikTok.
started TikTok.
Made some of those videos.
Started like content creating.
Ooh.
I mean, we were in lockdown. There wasn't loads to do.
Yeah.
Not in like a weird. It was pretty boring. I started music school at the same time, but it was online. It was like an online performance course.
Sure.
So I like would rock out in my bedroom, and that would be like it would be like so dead.
Rock and roll since birth.
Rock and roll since birth.
Yeah.
So I started creating videos whilst I was on my like lectures or Zoom calls, just for fun. And then it started doing really well, and got quite a bit of attention. And I was like, oh man, I can do this. I can. And began doing like live streams.
Yes.
And I'd say that was actually a really pivotal thing because I started.
You have incredible stories from those live streams, don't you?
Gosh, such amazing stories. I wasn't a Christian TikToker. I would make thirst traps.
As you've just seen.
Straight up.
Hopefully you've just seen.
I almost used it as an entrance. I mean, I didn't see it this way. I just saw it as making videos. But how God used it was an entrance into like a really dark space, which was people lonely in their bedroom, looking for satisfaction in like thirst traps.
Yeah. Which I suppose also, you'd also been in a place where you've been in your bedroom in a really dark place and going through very dark thoughts and all that stuff. So it's also interesting that parallel of you reaching people that you were also once in that position of. Yeah,
I started communicating on live streams, which has helped me massively because it meant I learned how to communicate.
Yeah.
Like now you look at the job and it's like, it's a lot of speaking. And that's kind of where I learned that skill because I just sit and chat to like comments for hours. And I saw a lot of fruit from it, but not how I anticipated. I didn't go in it as a ministry. I went into it as I'm going to like mess around and get loads of girls and or whatever. Yeah. So I remember like meeting girls and like spending evenings chatting to them, and maybe it got a little like raunchy and we fell into some bad Snapchat stuff. But I remember like when that would happen, I'd just end crying because I was like, I've failed God. Like I shouldn't have snapped that, or I shouldn't have done this. And they ended up getting so moved by the fact that I was so broken at the fact that I almost used them.
Sure.
That they were like, there's something different. What is it? And I'd say, well, I believe in Jesus. And they'd be like, wow, how do I do that? Which was ridiculous.
It's like, crazy what God uses sometimes.
Like we have a God who took evil and changed it to good.
Yeah.
There's only one person that can do, like God can do that. And he took quite a dark situation and used it for good. But there was this parallel. I was like finding a lot of community and stuff in like social media. Now I'd go to church and I started getting like serious panic attacks and like it was never diagnosed. But you know, forms of PTSD attacks from my time at school.
Sure.
I used to, you know, get visions of these guys who were looking for me to like attack me. And whilst like leading worship in church, I used to just look around at my friends because they all started getting into relationships and I didn't. And they all started hanging out in relationships and I wasn't. So like I was almost getting rejected a little bit there.
It felt like that.
And it felt, I started getting like these panic attacks of what was happening 2 years ago in church. So it wasn't a simple journey.
No.
You know, I went through these weird stages of trauma and mental illness, and struggling with a lot, with so many things, but God still used.
Absolutely.
And God still loved throughout that. That was like 14 to 16. What's next?
16 to 19.
16 to 18. I started experiencing God in a new way. I went to California when I was 17. I just bought tickets and crashed on couches. Because I was bored of school, so I just went out and
as you do.
I know, random,
as one does.
But I, you know, I began to meet with the Spirit in a new way,
Sure.
And I began to meet with God and receive his love and see a different way of living. And I was like, wow, God, like there's more to you than I thought. I remember dancing in the Spirit for the first ever time.
I would like to see you dance.
Oh, it was horrendous. I got filled with like the Holy Spirit, and I just started going like,
Oh my God. Sorry, I'm laughing with you, not at you.
oh, it was awful.
Yeah, that's bad.
No, it wasn't
In a lovely
awful.
way.
It was beautiful.
We love
God.
the Lord.
I expressed my love
Just
to the
not
Lord.
your dancing. But that's okay.
It was just like it was. Just
He
funny.
loves it, and that's what matters.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But that was quite key because I remember praying, Lord, like, what do you want me to do in my life?
Yeah.
I was just starting out with the Way UK.
Way.
Hashtag
The way.
The Way.
Like, follow, subscribe.
So just starting out with that and like, oh Lord, do you want me to continue with this? Do you want me to do music? Like, because I was studying music, like I feel like that's something. And like within like 3 days, he just started like lining up opportunity after opportunity music-wise. I was like, wow, okay, I guess this is it. And then I started going out onto the streets and just loved filming.
With the way.
With the way.
Just not on the streets.
Not onto the streets. Went out with the way and I was like, wow, this is really special. I think there's something here as well. And we come to me moving out. It was like a month before I moved out. I had a place to live for 1 month. I had no money.
Nope.
I had no like set job that I was moving up for, but I really felt a prompt from the Lord to move to London. So I prayed, Lord, if you want me to move to London, you need to give me £1,000.
Bold.
A little bold. You know, I was working £5 an hour at a coffee shop. And I got a call from a brand that saw my TikTok and they were like, hey, we'd love you to do like this video. You know, would you be up for it? And I was like, yeah, sure. How much is it? Like expecting like 100 or 200. They're like, oh, you know, like 800. I was like, what? 800 pounds for a brand? What? Like I was so young. I was like, okay, sure. So I did this brand deal. And then like 30 minutes after I got that call, I got another call from like another job, which was like, hey, we just need you like quickly for this thing. It'll take like 5 minutes. Just like, you just need to change this one thing, but we'll give you like 200 quid. And so within like an hour, I got given £1,000 of work in music, basically, which is what I wanted to do, which was ridiculous. And so I took that as a sign, moved up. And on the day I moved to London, the house I currently live in, their lodger moved out. So God literally provided accommodation for me to stay.
All fell into place.
Yeah, and now I've been living in London for a year and a half.
Yeah. And you still do that real mixture of music stuff and content-y stuff.
Half my week's music, half of it's like...
Which is amazing. It's amazing that God's given you so much talent and opportunity in like two quite different fields, actually. And it's really cool to see how God uses that.
It's really cool. And I was even chatting to one of the Way guys earlier today, hashtag Big Mike. And what a hero, shout out. And he was basically saying, we were reflecting on like a shoot we did about a year ago together. And we were just chatting about how even the way I communicate to people, the way I act in the mornings or however, or the asks I have are very different. And I think this past year or so of just being in a new church with new friends, it stretched me a lot. The first like September to September, there was a lot of loneliness. You know, when you spend 18 years with almost the same friendship group and then you move to people who you've only known for like a month.
It's tough.
It was hard. And there was a lot of prayers and a lot of like lonely nights and feeling like and confusion on what I'm doing. It's like I'd block out a day to try and do this music thing and I'd fail. Or I wouldn't do music in a week, or I'd do loads of media stuff and wouldn't like what I said. And there was a lot of time of just like, who am I? Like, is this really what I want to do? Still now to this day, like you have moments of that.
What am I doing?
You're like, what is this? Like when you sleep in and you're like, crap. But
I don't do that.
you don't sleep in.
I can't.
You can't sleep in.
I've got a job.
Yeah, that's true. I have a job as
I
well.
have a 9 to 5. Yeah, different kind of job.
But I'd say this year at St. Paul's, I've learnt deeper God's heart towards me, and I'm still learning that deeper.
Absolutely.
And it's a heart not to perform. It's a heart not to live up to a certain standard. It's a heart not to succeed. Obviously, God does call us to excellence, and He wants us to, glorify Him through our actions and our works and all that kind of thing. But and obviously there's a lot more than what I've just said. And there's a lot darker moments and a lot happier moments.
Yeah.
But for time, we'll just hit some of the key points.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Thank you so much for sharing with us and being honest. So we put on the Way stories for people to ask questions about testimonies and whatnot. So I've got a few
Mate, bring
on
the
the
questions.
phone. Are you ready?
The people are asking.
The people have asked quite a lot, actually. Question 1 we have from K. Van B. Catchy.
My G. Come on.
What are you most grateful for as part of your testimony?
Mentors. I think I would be so far away from God if I didn't have good mentors. As I had mentioned earlier, there was a guy called Joel who met with me every week. And he would say now, and he said to me before, there were a few weeks where it just felt like utter time waste. Like he was just hanging out with like a 16-year-old who was like, man, I just like messed up and I watched porn last night, Joel. And
What accent is this?
It's a little kiddie accent.
Oh, okay.
and he's like, yeah, it's all right, mate. Keep going. Like, you're doing well. Like, oh man, like everyone hates me. And he's like, no, it's all right. And he'd say that there were a few weeks where it felt like he wasn't actually making any progress. And it was quite hard to see. But he says now, what I see you doing is just shows that my investment was worth it.
Absolutely.
And he's so proud of the fact that he gave all that time. And I would be anywhere if I didn't have someone like that to just pour out my heart to every 2 minutes.
No, it's so kind.
And also parents who pray.
Yeah.
Like prayer, and really good praying friends. All my friends were just there and they all believed in God and they'd all pray for each other. We used to meet and do prayer walks as like a 3 every Tuesday and just be honest about what's going on in our hearts and pray together.
I suppose even though they're not like official mentors, like you do actually shape each other. You kind of do mentor each other in a weird way. Not in a weird way. You do mentor each other.
Mate, on it. You've never shaped me though as a friend.
Okay, cool.
Joking.
Question 2.
Love you lots.
Question 2 is from...
Do you need glasses, mate?
Kinda. What would
Do you want me to help? Mateus.
Just making up a name.
No, that's Mateus's Instagram.
Okay.
Like Mateus Carvello.
Okay, this one's from Mateus Carvello. Do you think you now have it figured out?
I'd say I have a better understanding on who God is and how He views me. But I don't think any of us will have it ever fully figured out until that moment comes when we reach heaven and Jesus comes again for His bride. That'll be when we figure it out.
And we don't need to have it all figured
We
out.
don't need to have it figured out. Like, I'm just a teenager.
Just not for long.
I can say it. I'm just a teenager figuring it out. And like being easy on yourself, like sometimes you can get so caught up in the day-to-day because the truth is every day we make mistakes and you can focus in on every single mistake you make every day, or you can look wider and you can look at the year and you can go, wow, actually, if I look at who I was a year ago and now, there is progress. Not saying it's bad to look at the day-to-day. It's good to like live daily. It even says it in the Bible, like tomorrow's not promised, so make the most of today. But yeah, anyway. You haven't got it figured out, nor do I, but we'll figure it out together.
We'll give it our best shot. Question 3. This one is from Naomi Ada. There's 2 A's at the end.
Ada.
What was the hardest thing about giving your life to Christ?
The hardest thing was probably letting go of things that actually don't matter.
Well, that actually links to this next. I'm just going to butt in immediately from your fave, Zara. What was one thing you had to let go of in order to start your walk with God?
Well, when you decide to become a Christian, it says there is a cost, and Jesus says in like Revelation when He's speaking to the churches in like a time of persecution, there will be persecution. There will be, Jesus, before he ascends into heaven, says there will be moments of tribulation. Like, I mean, paraphrasing. There will be times where suffering is present in life. There will be hardships when you say yes to God. And the difficulty is when you become a Christian, you know that it's not how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
When you're not a Christian, you can view suffering as just like, oh, this is a terrible thing, but that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're a Christian, you see suffering and you're like, this is a terrible thing, and this isn't how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And your heart almost longs for it. And so you know that there's a greater thing coming. And I don't know, that's quite hard when you see suffering and you know that there could be healing there. But also just the cost of sometimes friendships, the cost of time. Last night is a prime example. I finished working at like 9 p.m. or so, finished doing like admin, chores, all that kind of thing. And I felt from the Lord, like, you know, just take like what I literally felt from God saying, like, just take it easy and watch TV, because I hadn't done it. And he was like, relax, but first spend some time with me.
Yeah.
Every part of me just wanted to jump in bed and jump straight to the TV.
Yeah.
But actually, and like I literally wrestled with it for like a bit of time. But then I decided, okay, fine, I'll spend some time with God, and instantly felt rested and knew that it was where I was meant to be. It's like a funny thing. It feels like such a cost to give your time, but whatever you give for Jesus is worth it.
Absolutely.
Paul says it's like, I count everything as loss for the sake of knowing Christ. And although
What does that mean?
Which means like everything, despite if it feels good, is nothing in comparison to spending time with God and knowing God deeply. And so even yesterday, like I gave like maybe 30 minutes to God, but it just totally refreshed me, even though it felt like a pressure to get into it initially. Does that kind of explain it? The cost?
so.
There's other things that I've had to
course.
do. Like there's, you know, the Lord tells us to give, and that's always well, not always, but that's often a tough thing, because especially when you're new to making money, it's like it can feel like a lot sometimes, but that's what the Lord calls.
Absolutely.
And so there's lots of things.
For sure. And our final question is from Jacqueline Wongso. That's my guess. Can you feel / see the difference of being with Jesus and without?
Yes. Daily, yes. When you get closer to God, you realize how much of him sustains you and how much greater the way of living with God is. And it's almost like when you become a Christian and when you begin to realize his goodness, you realize how like bitter and how gross and tasteless some of the things of the world are.
Yeah.
And like some of the habits of the world are. And so obviously in the journey, when you get closer to God, you realize how much he sustains you over like Red Bull. Straight up.
Yeah, facts.
I mean, I've not really drunk much Red Bull in my life, but you do realize how much better God is than any other temporary satisfaction. How much better God is than an hour of sleep. He's the one who gives like energy. It says that the joy of the Lord is our strength. He's the one that gives strength. And so when I wake up and I don't spend time with him, you do feel sometimes off, and you have to catch a moment with him. Today I felt off because I didn't manage to spend time with him in the morning. So I went to Tesco's and grabbed a croissant and prayed. And then like I feel more united with his heart.
Yeah.
There's a scripture that I read 2 days ago in Psalm 86 or 85. It says this, teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. And I think that's been a bit of a prayer for me. It's just like every day, unite my heart with yours, Lord.
Yeah.
And teach me your ways, because your ways are better. Your ways are better. That's a great worship song. But it's true. It's like, but then also you got to trust in the fact that even if you don't have a moment in the morning or you don't have a moment in the evening, there's a very real process called sanctification.
What does that mean?
Which is essentially a process of the more you get to know God, the more you're changed.
Sure.
And the more your actions and the way you live and the way you think changes. And so sometimes you got to trust that even if you didn't get a moment with God in the morning, you've actually got like 5 or 6 years, or for some cases like 3 months, or like a year, or however long you've been walking with God. You've got time with God, and it's not like you've suddenly lost all of that and that your relationship's been cut off. Actually, you are still living like God, and you are still living in line with the Spirit, because you know the Spirit deeper. And you kind of got to trust that as well. Trust that, even if I don't get the time in the morning, I still have known God for X amount of time. And so he's still going to be with me today.
Yeah. It's a journey. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to share or give to us?
Yeah. I'd say be gracious to yourself in the journey. I often get so worked up with my daily decisions and my daily actions that it can get quite pressure-filled, religious, like overwhelming. But actually, if you look over time, as I said, like I'm a completely different man to the person I was even like 6 months ago. And I just, if there's any encouragement to people watching this, maybe there's things in your life that haven't quite been dealt with, or haven't quite, ceased. Or there's ways that you think, or ways that you act, or things in your heart that still feel wrong and sinful. That's the other thing about becoming a Christian. You're more aware of how wrong you are, and how weird you are, and evil you are. And so it can be quite overwhelming when you realize you're making mistakes a lot. But I'd say trust that it's actually a process. It's not an instant fix all the time. There can be moments of instant fix, but it's also a process. And so for those who might, be looking at all these stories and like, oh, God healed me from this, God freed me from this, and then this happened. It's like, actually all these freedoms and all these things happen in time. It wasn't overnight for me. I didn't, give my life as a 14-year-old and then suddenly I'm here. It's like there was such a process, and there were many mistakes. And
There still are sometimes.
There still are, and there'll be countless more. But yeah, that would be my final word for those who are just getting caught up with how they live. Trust that it's a process, and God is kind and patient, and there will be freedom.
Yeah, there will. Well, thank you again for sharing and for answering questions and giving a little bit of insight to your story. It's amazing to hear, actually. So thank you. And we hope that you've enjoyed listening and watching, and that you will return again one day.
Come back, please.
Come back again. Like, follow, subscribe. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, podcasts.
Oh, almost.
What did I miss?
Big Mike's Instagram.
Okay, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, great. There you go.